And thanks to everybody who submitted sounds for the first step in this 12-string iterative music project. I was very pleased with the amount of engagement here. We have 17 submissions totaling over 8 minutes. We won't do this every time, but let's start by listening to all the material in its entirety. This will hopefully give us some perspective on where we've come from, where we are, and how to get wherever we're going to go. Here's the reel that we started from. A number of recordings of a 12-string guitar being excited both by hand and also using the landscape Ferris. It's about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Okay, and here are all the sound files I received over the last couple weeks, made from that original reel. This totals about 8 minutes and 30 seconds. As you probably know, a Morphagene Reel can be a maximum of 2 minutes and 54 seconds. So as we listen, let's think about how we would make a reel from this material that is more than twice the amount we can fit in. So the way I think of it, the nearly 3 minutes of real time on the Morphagene is enough to contain several universes, while also keeping the knob and CV-based controls useful across the range. If we're building up a reel from pre-recorded material, there are a lot of potential things to think about. Let's think about some of them. Empty space and fade outs. Dynamic changes are easy to come by in a modular system. If you have your Morphagene patched to a VCA or low-pass gate or filter, then you can create fades and silence at will, and even turn a droning sound into a sound with an envelope, percussive ping, for example. Now, of course, it's not a hard, fast rule that you shouldn't have dynamics or silence within the sound in the reel, and neither is any of what I'm going to say. It might be useful, for example, to have a fade in or a fade out that you extend with a time stretch, or if you're using the Morphagene's envelope follower, then a great deal of dynamic range could be convenient. But when the amount of space in the reel is limited, the first thing I go to cut is silence and fade outs, because I just want to maximize the available time. And that definitely applies here to iteration 1 of this 12-string reel project. Is it important or necessary to fill the whole reel? The truth is, I often get tons of great results with reels that have even only a few seconds of material on them. So there's no reason to feel the need to use the entire space. Also, when it comes to iterative music, it can be useful to manipulate the output of the Morphagene, record the result back into a new splice, and then do the same thing over and over again, creating a series of variations that can then be sequenced through or utilized as new material. And if you want to do that, you have to have space available at the end of the reel that you can record into. But in this case, our iterations are taking place out in the world and comprising an entirely new series of reels, not reinterpreted within the same reel. And so, considering all the material that we've gathered here, I decided we'll go ahead and fill up the entire reel. Loops. There's a lot to be said for repetition in music in general, and specifically in electronic music, of course. Repetition can increase or decrease tension. It can provide a solid background for other sounds to mix in with or go further afield from. Coming back to restate a theme gives a sense of returning home. Conclusions. This is all classic stuff that's true in any form of music. However, because the Morphagene is capable of looping with precision, any section of sound as much as we want, I generally find there's no reason to include any repetition at all in a reel. Or successive instances of the same drum loop, for example, makes the splice and gene size controls have less precision, and the overall progression with the splice have less motion. This is one of many reasons I've found that, in my experience, what makes a great piece of music and what makes a great Morphagene reel are not one and the same. Now, of course, I'm more than happy to be proven wrong, and I wouldn't doubt that somebody out there has great reason to include looped material in a Morphagene reel. But again, since I'm trying to cut down as much as possible, for this reel I chose to cut out every portion of any splice that sounded like a repetition of more than a couple seconds. Small pitch shifts. Repitching material is very musically useful, since melodic changes are one of the core features of music, and also it can bring out different textures and flavors that may have been apparent on the original recording. That said, the Morphagene can repitch any material on the fly, so repitching in itself while creating the material for it might not really be necessary. The big exceptions I can think of are iterative. For example, pitching the same material down over and over again until it gets lower than even the Morphagene can go on first pass. Or also sequential. If we have a number of different pitch variations on multiple sounds across splices, then sequencing through them gives us a melodic sensibility that is different from modulating berry speed. Another question is about the overall content of the reel and how the splices are ordered. And I think I could further split this into two sub-questions. First, is the reel homogeneous or heterogeneous? In other words, do the splices sound like they came from the same source and have a similar character? Or is there a great deal of contrast and variety between splices? And second and related, in the order of splices within the reel, is there some ordering principle? Do they get louder or faster or more harmonically rich as we progress? Or do we instead have sharp jumps in flavor from one splice to the next? One splice to the next flavor of the splice. Emphasizing contrast. and the potential for rhythmic textures to arise from that contrast. In the case of this reel, I kind of avoided the question. I chose to simply place the splices in the reel in the same order that I received them. It's an arbitrary decision, and it will have unforeseen consequences for the sound when we shift between the splices. Now I'm curious, when you're creating a Morphagene reel, do you ask yourself these same questions? Do you have the same or a different approach from the one I've taken? And are there other factors you think of that I didn't bring up? Let's think about all this as we generate the next iteration of this 12-string reel. But first, let's listen to this one in its entirety. I've decided not to modulate this reel on screen at all this time. Instead, the reel is now available for download at the link in the video description. If you have time over the next couple weeks, please download this reel, iteration 1, and create a new iteration of 8. You can use whatever method and whatever audio tool you want. This time the submission length will be cut in half to 15 seconds. When you're making this 15 seconds or less of sound, think about how you would want your splice to fit into a new reel and how it might compare and contrast with other splices that come in. Are you going to carve it up into new rhythms, repitch it, add space or timbre or other transforms? When you send your file in WAV format in 15 seconds or less to walker@makenoisemusic.com, please also include a short description, not of the technical method you used to create it, but of the musical character you hope for it to embody, and how you think of it working not as a piece of music in itself, but as a part of a Morphagene reel to be used as material to make music out of. Here is a place for us to discuss not only the music we're making, giving each other ideas, and expanding on those of our fellow artists. I'm really excited for the next round, and hearing just what starts to come out of iterating on these recordings over and over again. Let's see how long we can keep it up. Until then, thanks for watching, and happy patching.